The emergency alert pierced through the quiet of Dr. Rowan Pierce's quarters aboard the Galactic Medical Center, its urgent pulse matching the sudden spike in his heart rate. 3 in the morning, station time. In 15 years of xenomedicine, late-night calls rarely brought good news. Dr. Pierce to Emergency Bay 7, the AI's calm voice contrasted sharply with the red warning lights flooding his room. Priority 1 diplomatic case. Rowan was already pulling on his medical uniform, muscle memory taking over as his mind raced through possibilities. Priority 1 meant either royalty or high-ranking diplomatic personnel. The combination of Emergency Base 7, reserved for crystalline-based lifeforms, and diplomatic status narrowed down the possibilities considerably. The corridors of the station's diplomatic wing hummed with unusual activity for this hour. Security personnel in formal uniforms stood at attention at every junction, their expressions tense. Something big was happening, something that went beyond standard medical emergency protocols. Director Helena Blackwood met him at the bay entrance, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of hasty preparation. Dr. Pierce, thank you for responding so quickly. We have 3 patients, all Lumerian princes. Rowan's steps faltered for just a moment. The Lumerians, a crystalline species known for their advanced technological civilization and complicated political structure. Their delegation had arrived last week for the final phase of peace treaty negotiations with the Earth Alliance. What's their condition? He asked, falling into step beside Helena as they entered the specialized treatment area. Complete inability to enter their regenerative state. They haven't achieved crystal stasis in over 72 hours. Rowan felt his breath catch. For crystalline beings like the Lumerians, regular periods of stasis were essential for maintaining their complex molecular structure. 72 hours without it was approaching critical levels. The emergency bay doors slid open to reveal 3 luminescent figures lying on specialized containment beds. Their crystalline forms, usually a brilliant blue-white, had dulled to an alarming gray. Fine fracture lines were beginning to appear along their outer layers, the equivalent of severe exhaustion in human terms. Ambassador Venna Starweaver stood nearby, her own crystalline form pulsing with worried colors. Doctor, thank you for coming. Our own healers are at a loss. The prince's condition defies all known treatments. Rowan approached the nearest prince, activating his diagnostic array. The readings were unlike anything he'd seen before. The prince's molecular structure was stable, but the resonance patterns that governed their consciousness were chaotic, preventing the transition into stasis. I am Prince Radiant, the figure spoke, his voice carrying the characteristic chiming undertones of his species. My brothers, Oryx and Zephyr, and I have been awake since the peace talks began. At first, we thought it was merely stress, but now you can feel your structure beginning to deteriorate, Rowan finished, studying the readings. Have you experienced anything like this before? Never, Prince Oryx spoke from the next bed. Our healers suspect sabotage, but they can find no evidence of external interference. Rowan moved between the 3 princes, comparing readings and noting patterns. Something about the resonance disruption seemed familiar, tickling at the edges of his memory. He'd seen similar patterns before, but in a completely different context. Director Blackwood, I need access to the Earth Alliance medical archives, specifically the studies on human bioelectric field variations during extended space travel. Helena raised an eyebrow but authorized the access immediately. The holographic display filled with data as Rowan quickly sorted through years of research. There, the pattern he remembered. Human crews on long-duration missions sometimes developed similar resonance disruptions in their own bioelectric fields, though with far less severe consequences. As he worked, Rowan didn't notice how his proximity affected the princes. Ambassador Venna did, however. Her crystalline form brightened with sudden interest as she observed the subtle changes in the prince's resonance patterns whenever Rowan moved closer to them. Dr. Pierce, she said carefully, would you mind standing next to Prince Radiant for a moment? Rowan complied, still focused on his data analysis. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. The chaotic patterns in Prince's radiant structure began to stabilize slightly, the gray tone of his form brightening just a fraction. Fascinating, Venna whispered, her form pulsing with excitement. Doctor, there are ancient stories among our people, tales of a time when we encountered beings whose very presence could calm the storms within our crystalline matrices. We dismissed them as myths, but... Rowan finally noticed the readings. His own bioelectric field was somehow harmonizing with the prince's disrupted patterns, creating small pockets of stability. It wasn't enough for a cure, but it was the first positive change they'd seen. Director, he said, turning to Helena, I need Dr. Jean Takeda from Xenobiology. If I'm right about this, we're going to need his expertise in crystalline molecular structures. And we need to move quickly, these fracture patterns are spreading. Helena was already sending the request when the station's security alert system activated. Agent Marcus Cole's voice filled the room. Director, we've detected unauthorized access attempts in the medical database, specifically targeting xenobiology research on crystalline species. Someone's very interested in what's happening in that emergency bay. The implications were clear. Whatever was affecting the princes wasn't random. Someone was trying to sabotage the peace talks, and they were willing to risk the lives of 3 royal heirs to do it. The race to save them had become even more complicated. As Rowan continued his examination, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something momentous. The connection between human bioelectric fields and Lemurian crystalline structures could revolutionize interspecies medicine, if they could understand it in time to save the princes. Prince Zephyr's voice chimed weakly from the third bed, Doctor, I believe I speak for my brothers when I say we place our trust in you. Our people stand at the brink of a historic alliance. Perhaps this crisis, though dangerous, is the catalyst we needed to truly bridge the gap between our species. Rowan met the prince's gaze, noting how the fracture lines were spreading across his once pristine surface. They had hours, at most, before the damage became irreversible. I'll do everything in my power to help you, he promised. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come from the most desperate situations. As if in response to his words, the emergency bay's systems registered a new set of readings. The prince's resonance patterns were changing again, but this time, they were beginning to synchronize, not just with each other, but with the unique frequency of Rowan's own bioelectric field. The question was, could they understand and stabilize this unexpected connection before it was too late? Dr. Jean Takeda burst into Emergency Bay 7 with the controlled urgency of a scientist on the verge of breakthrough. His dark eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in the 3 crystalline princes, the worried ambassador, and the complex array of monitoring equipment surrounding them. Rowan, these readings you sent are extraordinary, he said, already pulling up holographic displays of molecular structures. The resonance patterns between your bioelectric field and their crystalline matrices, I've never seen anything like it. The past hour had brought small improvements in the prince's condition, but only when Rowan remained in close proximity. Step too far away, and their structures would begin to destabilize again. He'd been moving between them, trying to maintain some level of stability for all 3. The effect is temporary, Rowan explained, watching the delicate dance of light patterns across Prince Radiant's surface. And it's not enough to let them achieve stasis. We need to understand why this is happening and how to amplify it. Ambassador Venna moved closer, her own crystalline form shimmering with mixed emotions. There is something I must share, she said, her tone carrying the weight of centuries. Our oldest archives speak of a time before our species achieved spaceflight, when we first encountered beings of flesh who could touch our essence. We called them the harmonious ones. Ambassador, Director Blackwood interrupted, why wasn't this information shared during the initial diplomatic exchanges? Because we believed it to be myth, nothing more than ancient stories told to younglings, Venna replied. But watching Dr. Pierce's interaction with the princes, the archives describe this exact resonance pattern. Jean was already diving deep into the molecular analysis, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic displays. The human bioelectric field has quantum properties we've barely begun to understand. Rowan, your particular field signature shows unusual stability patterns. Have you ever been tested for bioelectric anomalies? Before Rowan could answer, the lights in the emergency bay flickered. Agent Marcus Cole's voice came through the comm system, tense but controlled. Director, we've got another system breach attempt. More sophisticated this time. They're trying to access the prince's medical readings. Can you trace it? Helena demanded. Working on it. But whoever's doing this knows our systems well. Too well. Prince Oryx's voice chimed weakly from his bed. The opposition. They've infiltrated deeper than we suspected. The prince's surface rippled with distress, causing more fracture lines to appear. Easy, Rowan said, moving quickly to Oryx's side. The prince's structure began to stabilize again at his proximity. What opposition? There are those among both our peoples who oppose the alliance, Venna explained, her own colors darkening. They believe our species are too different, that closer ties will lead to the degradation of both cultures. But to go this far. The timing of the prince's condition wasn't random, Jean said, looking up from his analysis. These resonance disruptions, they're not natural. Someone found a way to specifically target their ability to achieve stasis. But they couldn't have known about this unexpected compatibility with human bioelectric fields. A soft alarm sounded from the monitoring equipment. Prince Zephyr's readings were declining sharply. Rowan rushed to his side, placing a hand near the prince's crystalline surface. The effect was immediate, the chaotic patterns began to smooth out. Dr. Takeda, Rowan called, look at this. The stabilization effect is stronger with direct proximity. Could we create some kind of field amplifier? Jin's expression lit up. Yes, yes. If we could isolate the specific frequencies of your bioelectric field that are creating this harmonic effect. He paused, frowning. But we'd need access to classified research on human bioelectric manipulation. That kind of request would take days to approve. We don't have days, Helena said grimly, studying the prince's deteriorating readings. Those fracture patterns will reach critical points within hours. Agent Cole's voice cut through again, Director, we've got something. The system breach attempts, they're coming from inside the station. Someone with high-level medical clearance. The implications settled heavily over the room. Someone on their own medical staff was involved in the attempt to sabotage the peace talks. Someone who would have the knowledge to both cause and monitor the prince's condition. Lock down all non-essential medical systems, Helena ordered. Restrict access to emergency bay data to present personnel only. Marcus, I want security teams checking every terminal that's accessed those files in the last week. Rowan shared a look with Jean. They needed those classified files to save the princes, but now they couldn't trust the official channels. Any request would alert their opposition. There might be another way, Jean said quietly, moving closer to Rowan and Helena. The Lumerian Archives ambassador Venna mentioned, they might contain the key to understanding this connection. If their ancestors developed methods for working with human bioelectric fields. The complete archives are stored in the Lumerian diplomatic vessel, Venna offered, her form brightening slightly. But accessing them would require royal authorization. Prince Radiant's voice rang out, stronger than before, you have it. Whatever you need, the archives, our technologies, our knowledge. The opposition seeks to keep our peoples apart, but perhaps this crisis is proving why we must come together. A subtle vibration ran through the station, the Lumerian vessel was docking, responding to Venna's urgent request. They had a chance now, but they also had a target on their backs. Whoever was behind this wouldn't stop just because their initial plan had failed. Director, Rowan said, looking at the strengthening resonance patterns between himself and the princes, I need to go to that ship. The answers we need are in those archives. You can't leave, Prince Oryx protested, his structure already showing signs of distress at the mere suggestion. Without your presence. I'll stay with them, Jean offered. I can monitor their condition and continue working on the field amplifier theory. But Rowan's right, we need those archives. Helena nodded sharply. Take Agent Cole with you. If our saboteur is tracking our progress, they'll make their move soon. Be careful, both of you. We're not just dealing with the prince's lives anymore. The future of human-Lemurian relations may depend on what we discover. As Rowan prepared to leave, he felt the weight of 3 crystalline gazes following him. The prince's structures pulsed weakly in sync with his own bioelectric field, a connection that defied current scientific understanding. Whatever answers lay in those ancient archives, he had to find them fast. The station's lights flickered again, and somewhere in the depths of its systems, someone watched their movements with growing concern. The race to save the princes had become a race to protect something even larger, the possibility of a future where humans and Lemurians could share their gifts openly, healing the divisions between their worlds one resonance at a time. The Lemurian diplomatic vessel shimmered like a cathedral of living crystal, its corridors resonating with subtle harmonies that seemed to pulse in time with Rowan's heartbeat. Agent Marcus Cole walked beside him, his trained eyes constantly scanning for threats as Ambassador Venna led them deeper into the ship. The ancient archives are kept in our memory matrix, Venna explained, her crystalline form casting rainbow reflections on the walls. They contain records dating back to our first contact with organic species, though many are fragmentary. How did these records survive? Rowan asked, noting how the ship's crystal structures responded to their presence. If the connection with humans was forgotten, surely the data would have been lost over time. Our memory matrix preserves everything, Doctor. Whether we understand it or not, whether we believe it or not. The challenge lies in interpretation. They entered a vast chamber where crystalline spires rose from floor to ceiling, each one containing millennia of stored information. The air hummed with energy that made Rowan's skin tingle, the same resonance he'd felt with the princes, but deeper, more complex. The saboteur has made another attempt, Marcus reported quietly, checking his secure comm link. They're getting desperate. Dr. Takeda reports the prince's condition is continuing to deteriorate, even with the stabilizing measures he's implemented. Venna approached a central control interface, her form merging partially with the crystal structure. I'm accessing the first contact archives now. The references to the harmonious ones are scattered throughout our earliest records, but there's a pattern to their appearances. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing ancient Lemurian script and diagrams. Rowan's neural translator worked to convert the complex symbolic language, revealing fragments of a story that had been waiting centuries to be told. Look at this, he said, pointing to a recurring symbol. This pattern appears in both the medical data from the princes and these ancient records. It's not just similar, it's identical. Marcus moved closer, his security training momentarily overshadowed by curiosity. What does it mean? It's a quantum signature, Rowan breathed, the implications hitting him all at once. The ancients weren't just recording observations, they were mapping the fundamental interaction between human bioelectric fields and Lemurian crystalline structures. Venna's form pulsed with excitement. Yes. Our ancestors discovered that certain humans possessed bioelectric fields that could naturally synchronize with our crystalline matrices. They called it the Harmony Protocol. More displays activated, showing complex diagrams of molecular interactions. They developed ways to amplify and control these interactions, Rowan said, his medical training helping him interpret the ancient data. But why was this knowledge lost? The answer came from an unexpected source. A security alert flashed across Marcus's comm device just as new information scrolled across the holographic displays. The opposition, Venna said grimly, reading the ancient text. They existed even then. They believed that depending on other species for healing would weaken our people. They systematically worked to discredit and suppress this knowledge. And now they're trying to do it again, Marcus added, his expression hardening. Dr. Pierce, these security breaches, they're not just trying to access data anymore. They're trying to erase it. Rowan's mind raced, connecting pieces of the puzzle. The prince's condition, the timing of it all, they're using the same resonance disruption technique that the ancient opposition developed. They rediscovered the old knowledge and turned it into a weapon. Doctor, Venna interrupted, her form flickering with urgency, these records contain something else. The Harmony Protocol wasn't just about healing. It was a bridge between our species, a way to share knowledge and experiences directly through crystalline organic resonance. The chamber's lights suddenly dimmed, and Marcus's comm device erupted with alerts. "We've got intruders on the ship," he reported, drawing his weapon. "Multiple signatures moving toward the archive chamber." "How much more time do you need?" he asked Rowan, taking up a defensive position near the entrance. "The data is here, but it's massive. We need to." Rowan trailed off, staring at his own hands. The tingling sensation had grown stronger, and the nearest crystal spires were resonating visibly with his presence. "Ambassador, can the memory matrix interface directly with a human bioelectric field?" Venna's form rippled with concern. "Theoretically, yes. The ancient records speak of such connections, but the process was dangerous, overwhelming for most humans." "We don't have a choice," Rowan said, stepping toward the central interface. "The princes are running out of time, and we need to understand this knowledge completely, not just read about it." "Rowan, wait," Marcus called, but footsteps were already echoing down the corridor outside. The opposition was closing in. "Ambassador, help me interface with the Matrix." "Agent Cole, buy us some time." The next few moments passed in a blur of action. Marcus secured the chamber entrance while Venna guided Rowan through the interfacing process. The instant his hands made contact with the central crystal, his consciousness expanded exponentially. Thousands of years of Lemurian knowledge flooded his mind, filtered through the lens of his unique bioelectric signature. He saw the first meetings between humans and Lemurians, witnessed the development of the Harmony Protocol, felt the profound connection that had once existed between their species. Most importantly, he understood why the opposition feared this connection so deeply. It wasn't just about healing or cultural purity. The resonance between humans and Lemurians had the potential to fundamentally change both species, creating something entirely new. Through the overwhelming flow of information, Rowan held on to the critical details they needed, the exact frequencies required for healing, the amplification techniques, and the protective measures against resonance disruption. The ancient Lemurians had solved these problems once before. Now, centuries later, their solutions might save not only the princes but the future of human-Lemurian relations. The sound of energy weapons discharging outside the chamber barely registered. Marcus was holding off the intruders, but they were running out of time. With a tremendous effort, Rowan began to pull back from the interface, his mind struggling to process everything he'd absorbed. "I know how to help the princes," he gasped as Venna helped him break the connection. "But we have to get back to the medical bay immediately. The opposition isn't just trying to stop the alliance, they're trying to prevent a transformation they've feared for centuries." As if to emphasize his words, the ship's crystal structure began to pulse with a new rhythm, resonating with the changed patterns of Rowan's bioelectric field. The knowledge of ages had left its mark on him, and now he had to use it before it was too late, for the princes, for the alliance, and for the future that the ancient Lemurians had once dreamed possible. Emergency Bay 7 erupted into chaos the moment Rowan, Marcus, and Venna returned. The princes' conditions had deteriorated significantly during their absence, their crystalline forms now webbed with fracture patterns that pulsed an angry red. Dr. Jean Takeda's normally calm demeanor had given way to barely contained panic as he worked frantically at the monitoring stations. "Their molecular cohesion is failing," Jean reported, his fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. "Whatever I try to stabilize one prince destabilizes the others. We're losing them." Rowan's mind was still reeling from the massive download of ancient knowledge, but he forced himself to focus. "We need to modify the containment fields." The ancients didn't treat multiple patients individually, they created a harmonized resonance chamber. He began reconfiguring the emergency base systems, his newly acquired knowledge guiding his actions. The containment fields around the three princes shifted, merging into a single synchronized energy matrix. Director Blackwood watched from the doorway, her expression tense as she coordinated with station security. The opposition team that attacked the archive chamber has gone to ground, Marcus reported, securing the emergency bay entrance. But they managed to transmit some kind of signal before we cut them off. As if in response to his words, the prince's crystalline structures began to vibrate at a painful frequency. Prince Radiant's voice emerged, strained and fragmented, there, amplifying the disruption. Rowan, Jean called urgently, these readings, the opposition isn't just trying to prevent stasis anymore. They're attempting to shatter their molecular structures completely. The ancient knowledge surged through Rowan's mind, showing him exactly what the opposition was doing, and how to counter it. They're using our own station's communication array to broadcast the disruption frequency. Ambassador Venna, I need you to interface with the emergency bay's crystal matrices. Jean, reroute all power to the containment field. That'll take life support offline, Helena warned from the doorway. Only for a few minutes, Rowan assured her, already moving to position himself between the three princes. The Harmony Protocol requires total synchronization, no competing energy signatures. The lights dimmed as Jean diverted power. Venna merged with the nearest crystal matrix, her form becoming a conduit for the containment field's energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. What exactly are you attempting, Doctor? Helena asked, even as she authorized the power transfer. The ancient Lemurians discovered that human bioelectric fields could do more than just stabilize their crystalline structures, Rowan explained, feeling the energy building around him. Under the right conditions, they could create a quantum bridge, a direct connection that allowed both species to share their natural strengths. The opposition's disruption frequency intensified, causing visible waves of distortion through the prince's forms. Fracture lines deepened, threatening to shatter their structures completely. Now, Jean! Rowan called out. The containment field pulsed with gathered power, and Rowan felt his bioelectric field expand, guided by the ancient knowledge. The quantum bridge began to form, not just between him and one prince, but connecting all three simultaneously through the harmonized field. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Rowan's consciousness merged partially with the prince's crystalline awareness, creating a resonance that the opposition's disruption frequency couldn't touch. Through this connection, he could feel the ancient patterns asserting themselves, stabilizing the prince's molecular structures. The fracture patterns are receding, Jean reported, his voice filled with wonder. Their molecular cohesion is stabilizing. But Rowan, your bioelectric field is operating at levels we've never recorded in a human before. The strain was intense. Maintaining the quantum bridge with three patients simultaneously was pushing Rowan to his limits. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought to hold the connection steady. Through the bridge, he could sense the prince's growing awareness. Their consciousness began to align with the harmonic frequency, and suddenly they weren't just being healed, they were actively participating in the process. The ancient records spoke of this, Venna whispered, her crystalline form pulsing in sync with the energy field. When both species contribute to the harmony, the connection becomes self-sustaining. The emergency bay filled with shifting patterns of light as the prince's structures began to glow with renewed energy. The opposition's disruption frequency continued to broadcast, but it no longer had any effect. The quantum bridge had created a protective resonance that couldn't be broken from outside. Their molecular structures are fully stabilized, Jean announced, checking the readings. And these energy patterns? Rowan, I think they're ready to enter stasis naturally. One by one, the prince's forms shifted into the crystalline configuration of deep stasis, their surfaces now smooth and free of fracture lines. As they did, the strain on Rowan began to ease. The quantum bridge had done its work. But something else had happened, something the ancient records had only hinted at. As Rowan carefully withdrew from the connection, he could still feel echoes of the crystalline consciousness he had touched. The princes would carry traces of his bioelectric patterns, just as he now held fragments of their crystalline awareness. "Doctor," Prince Radiant's voice chimed softly from his stasis form, "we understand now why the opposition feared this so deeply. This connection, it changes both our species. Not through degradation, as they feared, but through mutual growth. The station's security teams have located the opposition members," Marcus reported from the doorway. "They're being taken into custody. But their leader is still unaccounted for." Helena stepped forward, studying the restored princes with a mix of relief and concern. "Dr. Pierce, what you've done here, it goes beyond just saving the princes. You've rediscovered a connection between our species that could change everything." "Not rediscovered," Rowan corrected, still feeling the resonance of the quantum bridge in his mind. "Reminded. The connection was always there, waiting to be understood again. The question now is, are both our species ready to accept it? The answer would have to wait." For now, the immediate crisis was over, but Rowan knew this was just the beginning. The opposition's leader was still out there, and the knowledge of the Harmony Protocol was once again active in the galaxy. The bridge between humans and Lemurians had been rebuilt, but maintaining it would require courage, understanding, and the willingness to grow beyond what either species thought possible. 3 days after the emergency in Bay 7, the Galactic Medical Center's main conference chamber hosted an unprecedented gathering. The 3 Lemurian princes, their crystalline forms now restored to full radiance, stood before a mixed audience of humans and Lemurians. The peace treaty signing had been delayed, but not for the reasons the opposition had hoped. "What we witnessed in Emergency Base 7 wasn't just a medical breakthrough," Director Helena Blackwood addressed the assembled dignitaries. "It was proof that our species are capable of connections we never imagined possible." Rowan sat quietly in the front row, still adjusting to the changes within himself. The quantum bridge had left its mark, subtle crystalline patterns now flickered occasionally beneath his skin, visible only in certain lights. According to Jin's tests, his bioelectric field had been permanently altered, resonating at frequencies that matched Lemurian crystal harmonics. "The opposition believed they could prevent our peoples from growing closer," Prince Radiant spoke, his voice carrying the clear chimes of perfect health. "Instead, their actions revealed the depth of connection that was always possible between us." Ambassador Venna stepped forward, her form shimmering with formal patterns. "We've begun translating the full archives of the Harmony Protocol. Already, we've discovered applications that go far beyond emergency healing. The quantum bridge opens possibilities for shared consciousness, cultural exchange, and technological advancement that neither species could achieve alone." The conference chamber's crystal matrices hummed in response to the excitement in the room. Rowan could feel them now, just as he could sense the subtle bioelectric fields of every human present. It was a new way of perceiving reality, a blend of human and Lemurian awareness. "We've captured most of the opposition members who attacked the archive chamber," Agent Marcus Cole reported from his position near the door. "But their leader, Chief Medical Officer Dresden, is still at large. We believe he's fled to the outer colonies." "Let him run," Prince Oryx chimed. "The truth he tried to suppress will now spread faster than he can travel." Already, other humans with compatible bioelectric patterns are being identified throughout the Alliance. Dr. Jean Takeda stood to present his findings, excitement evident in his voice. "Our preliminary studies suggest that approximately 1 in every 1,000 humans possesses the potential for Lemurian resonance. With proper training and the techniques preserved in the ancient archives, they could all learn to establish quantum bridges. Which is why," Helena announced, "the Alliance Council has approved the establishment of the first human Lemurian medical exchange program. Dr. Pierce will serve as its founding director, helping us train a new generation of healers who can work with both species." Rowan felt a ripple of surprise and honor flow through him, visible in the brief crystalline shimmer beneath his skin. Prince Zephyr, noting his reaction, chimed with amusement. "You've already proven yourself capable of teaching, Doctor," the prince said. The knowledge you share through the quantum bridge helped us understand our own biology in ways our healers never contemplated. This exchange of perspective is exactly what both our peoples need. The meeting continued, but Rowan's attention was drawn to the window overlooking the station's crystal garden. The plants there, a gift from the Lemurian delegation, had begun growing in new patterns since the activation of the Harmony Protocol. Crystalline structures formed among their leaves, while organic patterns emerged in the crystal matrices. Neither purely one form or the other, but something new, something that showed what was possible when different species grew together. The opposition feared change, Ambassador Venna said softly, joining him at the window. They saw only the loss of what was, never the potential of what could be. But look there, even our simplest life forms show us the way forward. The peace treaty, when it was finally signed later that day, contained additions that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Provisions for cultural exchange went far beyond traditional diplomacy, incorporating the possibility of shared consciousness experiences through the quantum bridge. Medical cooperation expanded into realms that blended Lemurian crystal technology with human bioelectric innovation. As Rowan watched the princes take their turns signing the document, he felt the resonance between them pull stronger. The connection they'd shared during the emergency had created a lasting bond, proof that their species could do more than just coexist, they could grow together, evolve together, become something greater than the sum of their parts. There will be others who resist this change, Marcus commented, ever vigilant despite the celebratory atmosphere. Dresden and his followers won't give up easily. No, Rowan agreed, feeling the crystalline patterns beneath his skin respond to his resolve. But they don't understand what they're really fighting. This isn't about humans becoming more like Lemurians, or Lemurians becoming more like us. It's about both our species discovering what we can become together. The station's lights dimmed briefly as the final signatures were added to the treaty, then brightened to a new frequency that both human eyes and crystalline surfaces could fully appreciate. In the crystal garden, more hybrid growth patterns emerged, reaching toward the stars that waited to be explored by this new alliance. The opposition had tried to prevent change by attacking three princes. Instead, they had catalyzed a transformation that would ripple through both civilizations. As Rowan prepared to meet his first group of human Lemurian medical students, he smiled at the irony. Sometimes the greatest bridges were built by those who tried hardest to keep worlds apart. The future would bring challenges, certainly. But now they would face them together, their differences becoming their greatest strength. The quantum bridge had shown them the way, not to erase what made them unique, but to harmonize their gifts into something unprecedented in the galaxy. In Emergency Base 7, now converted into the first classroom for the medical exchange program, the crystal matrices pulsed with anticipation. The next chapter in human-Lemurian relations was about to begin, and its first words would be written in frequencies that both species could finally, truly share.